Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. The pubs aren't open yet. Opening on the weekend, actually. So you might well see Sunday Vibes from a pub over the next few weeks, potentially, boys, if we can.
Nice.
Big promise.
Not at all.
Heads being
Big
shaken.
promise.
Not sure if that's going to happen, but either way, we are here to answer your burning questions, me, Chris, and Pat. First one was sent in by Jack Molly, who says, with Leicester in terrible form and Wolves on the up, who do you back to finish higher? Not talking about any of the big boys today. Well, I suppose Leicester fans and Wolves would say they're big clubs, but the truly big clubs. So who wants to kick us off? Hamster, you usually talk about Leicester, so you want to lead the line with Leicester?
Go on, you've promised the fans will be back in the pub in the next couple
I never
of weeks.
said the word promise. Stop putting words in my mouth.
And you've made sure that Leicester and Wolves fans know that they're not big clubs. So what a fire opening from you. We're certainly not going to be reporting from a pub in Leicester anytime soon, are we? So shout out to all the broskies that are locked down.
Are they going to be allowed to play at home?
A confusing issue. I don't think it's been clarified yet. I think the next game is going ahead, and that's as far as they've got. Obviously, no laughing matter, but let's talk about the football anyway, because this has coincided with Leicester's kind of, not fall from grace, that's a little bit harsh, but their form has been inconsistent, to say the least. Still technically in the driving seat, 3 points ahead with a game in hand, a goal difference of plus 30 to Wolves' plus 11. Wolves obviously drawn an awful lot of games, haven't they, despite having the second best record or third best record in the division in terms of games lost. However, since the break, Leicester have drawn 2, lost to Chelsea in the FA Cup, and their poor form stretches back way before that, doesn't it? In fact, in their last 10 league games, the Foxes had only won 2 and taken 10 points, a record which ranks them 14th in the league for that period. Not exactly Champions League, securing that Champions League berth sort of form, is it? Vardy, his form has been a real issue. We kind of said the whole season that he was running really, really hot, and he was playing well. He was taking his opportunities, but he was still taking under 2 shots a game. And to be leading the league, I think he's still on 17 goals, with those sort of underlying numbers, is a rarity. His shots have dropped now to 1.7 a game, I believe. And he scored just twice since the 21st of December, which was against Villa in the same game, right? Ben Chilwell scored as many goals in that period. And, I mean, Harvey Barnes and Ayoze Perez, who have become less so Harvey Barnes, I guess, a little bit maligned, have both been involved in 6 goals in that period. And then plus Gray, Iheanacho, Maddison and Tielemans are all having more shots than their star striker, who they're heavily reliant on. So it is worrying for Foxes fans. Tie in the James Maddison injury, and all of a sudden Leicester's trajectory faltering big time. And they've got some tough games coming up, man. Away to Everton, Arsenal and Tottenham. They host Sheffield United, a resurgent Man United, who I can't believe I'm enjoying watching at the moment, Joe. What is going on? What is this sorcery from Bruno Fernandes? And their only games, really, easy games, are Crystal Palace and Bournemouth. And Crystal Palace are no mugs, are they? I mean, they'll smash Bournemouth about. They might as well not be in the division at this point. But yeah. Wolves, on the other hand, are on the up and up.
Oh, coming to me. Okay. Wolves have kind of got the opposite story, to be honest. I mean, the first half of the season, you were seeing a lot of criticism for them and people saying, we expected better after that first year back in the Prem. They were so good. But after Christmas, they really, really have found the right gear. I mean, since the restart, they've won 3 of 3. They've scored 4, conceded 0. But since January, they've actually got the joint second best record in the league, level with City, only behind Liverpool, which is pretty remarkable. I mean, they've got the best defence in the league by a mile since Christmas. Seriously, by a mile. 8.6 expected goals against in 12 games. That's about 0.7 a game. By comparison, Liverpool have allowed just over 1 expected goal a game in that same period. And it's not like Wolves' attack is faltering either, which has been a bit of a problem for them in the past. They've had the 4th best attack in the division during that period. Only Salah has outscored Jimenez since the new year. Adama Traore's actually got the most assists in the league in that same period. He's got 5, whereas Kevin De Bruyne, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and I think weirdly Robert Snodgrass have all got 4 assists. Like, you wouldn't have thought it at the beginning of the season, the way Vardy went off like a rocket, but Jimenez has actually caught up to him pretty much. Like, Vardy's got 19 goals and 4 assists. Jimenez has got 15 goals and 6 assists. And he's played more minutes, and he's still a couple behind there, but only Salah, Mane and KDB have more goal involvements than both of those 2 players. So Jimenez is really powering them this season, especially as, you know, Jota had a bad first half of the campaign. Then he was just getting into really good form when the season was suspended, which was a little bit unfortunate for them. But obviously they've managed to regroup, get going again, and their defence is what it's always been, which is the engine of their overperformance. Fixtures-wise, there's not really... They don't really have much of an advantage over Leicester, I've got to say. They've got Arsenal, Everton, Sheffield United, Chelsea. Those are all pretty tough games. They've got Palace and Burnley. And they have the Europa League. They've got a second leg against Olympiacos at some point. But I imagine at this point that's going to happen after the end of the season. So I suppose you don't have to worry too much.
Yeah, it's in August. It's in August.
Yeah, but it still might be a focus for them. Like, I mean... If Man United continue their form, and if, say, Leicester can win their game in hand, you could imagine Wolves saying, look, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep trying to get the Champions League. But now our priority is to win the Europa League instead. Because also, over 2 legs in the Europa League, such a well-coached, solid defensive side with a couple of excellent attackers, there's absolutely no reason that they couldn't go all the way there, really. I think the number of teams in the Europa League that are clearly better than Wolves is vanishingly small. So I'm quite bullish on Wolves, but I mean, it is technically still in Leicester's hands, like Chris says.
Yeah, I think Wolves will still finish lower than Leicester. Just to go back to the question, I think that Wolves are like... I know that Diogo Jota, we like Diogo Jota, and Pato, you're pretty bullish about him being one of the best options for a big club to come and take. We were talking before off camera, but I think if Raul Jimenez picks up even a slight injury, then they are in a bit of trouble. And I know you can say the same about Jamie Vardy, but I think Kelechi Iheanacho is a better backup in that direct forward area than Diogo Jota is at Wolves, just because he's not an out-and-out number 9 in the same way they use Raul Jimenez.
Yeah.
Everything goes directly into Raul Jimenez, and then they spring off the back of that. Whereas I don't think you can play the same way with Diogo Jota. Whereas Kelechi Iheanacho, I think probably has earned a little bit more game time than he's currently getting at Leicester Hamill.
Yeah, I mean, in the loss to Chelsea when they were trailing, Iheanacho remained on the bench, and that was a little bit puzzling, right? And for as much as I've lauded Brendan Rodgers as a very good tactician in times gone by, and he is, and his understanding of the game's obviously phenomenal, his plan B at Leicester is still to get Mark Albrighton on, still to launch balls to that back post in the hope that the ball's put back across for Jamie Vardy to sort of nip in. So their plan B at Leicester is still a little bit uninspiring. And the fact he didn't entrust Iheanacho to come on to save the game like he's done an awful lot this season would suggest that he's maybe going to be looking at striking options, significant striking options moving forward. And we might talk about a few transfer targets in a moment. But without Maddison, I think in that 10 position, bringing Barnes into the game, bringing Vardy into the game, because he often drops deep as well, Maddison, to pick up the ball, because Leicester aren't the best at progressing it through the middle. They've always been heavily reliant on their fullbacks and their wingers to really take the game to the opposition. Without Maddison, good, borderline great players in that team become good or become average. And that's quite worrying, to be that reliant on, a 3-year-old. To that extent, they only look like a Champions League side when he's bang at it. When Wilfred Ndidi is fit, mobile, I mean, he is now, and he was still fairly good against Chelsea. And when Jamie Vardy's getting that little bit of, I don't want to say luck, because he engineers a lot of it himself, doesn't he? But when he overperforms. So yeah, they were my sort of observations from the Chelsea game. I don't know about yours. We spoke about it on Winners and Losers a little bit, but did you see any sort of really any worrying signs, or would you target one area of recruitment specifically for the summer for Leicester?
I do think it is important to get another striker in, because there is still too much over-reliance on Jamie Vardy. I think I still, to this day, don't understand the signing and the capture of Ayoze Perez. Overall, I think he's probably playing the wrong role. I think he's more of a second striker, and he's kind of being forced to play a little bit wider. There goes my front door, but I'll get that in a bit. But yeah, I think that Ayoze Perez's signing didn't make an awful lot of sense to me, and it still doesn't. So I think they'll probably go for another striker in the summer. But I also wasn't overly convinced by Yuri Tielemans in that game. I think that Yuri Tielemans maybe struggles a little bit without that James Maddison character in front of him to help be a creative outlet. And maybe it's one of the reasons that other big clubs weren't going in for him at the tune of, what was he, 30 million in the end? And everybody was like,
40,
this is a steal. Because I just wasn't sure what he was bringing to that Leicester team against Chelsea.
Well, he was dropped intermittently before the break after starting the season really well and obviously finishing the end of last season really well, I should say. And he seems a little bit unwilling to do the defensive work. That might just be a tactical ploy. That might be instructions from Rodgers because Ndidi's there. And when Ndidi's there, he can his contribution amounts to that of two players. So maybe he was under strict instructions to stay in the final third. But he can cut an isolated figure and is a little less willing than Maddison to make things happen from deep, to go and fetch the ball. And sometimes him and Perez operate in the same area somewhat. Like he drifts out right occasionally, like he puts in a wicked ball. But then that sort of him and Perez begin to step on each other's toes. So I think you're right. I think we thought that might be a little bit of a miss, that sign-in for the fee. It was probably worth the gamble at the time if they weren't going to secure any of their other targets. I kind of wanted them to go for Ferran Torres at the time. He's now been linked with Manchester United and Juventus, the young Valencian prospect. I think he's 20 now. But yeah, it'll be an interesting summer for Leicester because if they do secure Champions League football, in order to stay there, they're going to have to make some big signings. I don't know about Wolves, Pat. Do you think they need any major surgery or is it just a case of a couple of solid additions?
There are some places where they could probably do with strengthening. Like they've got some aging pieces. Like you look at the back line. I think Bolly's got a year left on his contract, and he's 29. Jimenez is not young. On the other hand, for all the rumours we hear about Jimenez leaving this summer, I think in a market where Leroy Sané, admittedly with a year left on his contract, is going for like 49 basic, I can't see somebody offering Wolves enough money to make it worth their while to sell Jimenez. On the other hand, if somebody came in with an insane bid for Adama Traore, I would probably think very seriously about it because he's a good player. He's obviously an amazing dribbler and he's a danger, but I also don't think he's like that special. Like, I mean, like they could definitely, if you could sell him for really big money and bring in two guys, I think that'd probably be worth doing. They definitely need a striker, and they definitely need another midfielder, especially with João Moutinho aging. But to be honest, like it's interesting, like what you were saying before, Joe, about an injury to Jimenez being such a problem for them. I completely agree. But around the rest of the squad, I feel like they are less reliant on outstanding individuals than Leicester are. Like I think, yes, if Jimenez gets injured, that's a huge issue for Wolves. But a lot of other places in the squad, they're kind of able to fade injuries reasonably well because they do actually have quite a deep squad and they have such a solid system. Leicester, on the other hand, it's not just about if Vardy gets injured. It's also, like Maddison getting injured, Ndidi getting injured, Chilwell, Pereira. So the other day, you see a lot of ball progression responsibility placed on Tielemans, which, to be honest, he is excellent at. But he's got to do even more than normal if you're not playing Pereira and you don't have Maddison. Like, that's really difficult. Wolves, I think, can fade those misses a little bit more easily. But yeah, I would definitely be looking for a real lights out partner for Neves going forward. I'd be looking for a striker. I'd probably look at another winger, maybe, and long-term another centre-back. But they might keep their powder dry this summer unless they get in the Champions League. I think that probably they've got a two-tiered transfer plan. One if they don't make the Champions League and one if they do.
Yeah, I think for Leicester as well, there's obviously a lot of interest in their players coming into this window, isn't there? Ben Chilwell being one of them. And I was watching him against who was the team he scored the wonder goal against? It was
Watford.
Watford, yeah, the Watford game, and obviously a fantastic strike to get them in front, and they ended up drawing the game thanks to that overhead kick. But I don't see the £80 million valuation in Ben Chilwell. I see signs of like a very consistent and solid left back, and I think he's put up 3 goals, 3 assists this season. But I don't see the monster fee being warranted, especially in a market where we're seeing Achraf Hakimi move for 40 million. Like Pat said, we're just seeing Leroy Sané go for quite a cheap amount. So I would be surprised, if Chelsea come in for Ben Chilwell. So I think Leicester might actually be able to keep hold of him, Hamill.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Manchester United as well make very bullish claims on the fact they're not going to overpay for Jadon Sancho. And this summer, going hand in hand with the pandemic, this might be big clubs sort of drawing a line in the sand for at least a year, 18 months, 2 years in terms of their willingness to overpay to secure these young players. And of course, young players are much less inclined to be hoarded now. They want to go out and find first team football as well, don't they? So that's going to be interesting, an interesting dynamic moving forward. But Ben Chilwell, like the media have placed that valuation on him. I think he's probably suffering a little bit because of that heightened level of expectation. Like, he is an excellent left back. He's got great natural pace. He's a great runner with the ball. Like, he's intelligent. He tucks in at the right times. And he's probably, in the top 5 in the division. Is he worth 80 million? Knowing, you can go and get two really good players for that in Europe's other divisions. No. Is Chelsea's willingness to pay that going to wane in the next 2 to 3 months? Probably. So they might have been willing to pay that, start of last summer, sorry. But I'd be very surprised if they bid anywhere near that amount. I think Pat flagging Ricardo Pereira's injury is one that I just forgot about for the time being. I mean, he was extremely influential, wasn't he, when in the side? Just led the division for tackles as well. So Leicester have suffered big time as a result of losing a truly two-way fullback. But James Justin has actually proved a really good deputy. So shout out to some of the performances he's put in. I mean, standards extremely high because of what Pereira can do. But he's been a little silver lining, I suppose, in Leicester's poor form.
All right, then. So who do we think is going to finish higher this season? Let's actually answer the question, because I saw loads of comments last week being like, they didn't actually answer the question. They talked about it, but they didn't actually answer it. So let's answer the question. Who is going to finish higher this season, Leicester or Wolves? And are you going to revise any of your We Need to Talk predictions for these two sides?
Pat, you go first, buddy, because I've just ranted.
I think... Oh, God. If it weren't for the goal difference, I'd say Wolves. But that goal difference is just worth an extra point. Leicester in pretty bad form. But I could see Wolves beating Arsenal at Molineux, beating Sheffield United, beating Palace, beating Burnley. Christ. I will say Leicester, but to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised either way.
I have a dreadful, dreadful feeling in the pit of my stomach that it might be Manchester United, which is totally inconceivable before the break. But you can't win 2 matches in 10 with Champions League ambitions. So I'm gonna stay with Leicester, but I think United for me rank above Wolves actually.
Oh, I didn't know we were talking about who was going to finish there. Like, I thought we were talking who was going to finish higher, Wolves or Leicester.
Right. So I might have cheated there, but I think United might sneak into the Champions League places. But answering the question, Leicester will finish above Wolves.
Yeah, I also think Leicester will just pip Wolves. But both run-ins are actually pretty difficult, aren't they? Both run-ins are really difficult. And I think it might come down to, like you said, Pato, they might have to have one eye on the Europa League. Wolves just might have to rest a couple players in those last few games. So I think it might come down to that. But I'll say Leicester probably going to come back to bite all of us on the arse
Leicester.
in like 3 weeks' time. Right, let's move on to some quick fire questions then. Now we've discussed Wolverhampton Wanderers and Leicester. This one was sent in by Alex Barker. He says, which league that is not recognised as a top 5 one are you the most interested in? I.e., what players interest you, teams you like to watch, Pato?
Well, I kind of saw this question and thought it might be interesting because I saw some people telling you should respect the Portuguese league more because of how good Bruno's been. So I thought it was quite interesting. I mean, for me, it's though I always think the Eredivisie is going to attract me more than others because I think there are a couple of decent sides there. There are always good young players, which I think is always exciting to see. I'm not really interested in the Portuguese league. And what are the other alternatives? I mean, like, you look at Austria or whatever, and you just see that it's just like Salzburg, like, battering everyone every week. So, yeah, I definitely think the Eredivisie, just because, to me, what's exciting in football is what's next. I really like that excitement of discovering a new player and thinking, like, wow, this might actually be somebody, and thinking about where they'd fit, what they might go on to achieve. Like, if you enjoy that stuff, then the Eredivisie is a really good place. And it's also just more tactically adventurous than other leagues. Like, if you want to see centre-backs dribble up the pitch, like, that happens all the time in the Eredivisie. You see centre-backs completing a bunch of dribbles. It's mental, and it's really, really enjoyable. So, plus now, I think, the quality of player it's producing is the best it's been for a while. So, yeah, the Eredivisie.
Just to address some of the people who are like, you need to put some more respect on the Portuguese league that I was getting, because obviously Bruno Fernandes is come in and done pretty well at Manchester United. I think the Portuguese league can produce some Brunos, but it can also produce some absolute shit, can't
Some
it? That are clinically overrated and then come in and just absolutely flop. But you can say the same about most leagues, to be honest with you. I just never watched the Portuguese league. Like, I think everybody thought that I was battering Bruno before he came in. I think on most of the shows I probably said something along the lines of, I've not seen him enough to think whether or not he'll be an amazing player or a terrible player, and he's proved to be an amazing player. But yeah, I would say the Eredivisie, my answer to this question, just because I like watching Ajax the most in the Champions League of any of the sides. Like, I can't say I enjoy watching Benfica or Porto or Sporting Lisbon, whoever in the Champions League and Europa League. I'd much rather watch an Ajax game just because I like the philosophy and the way they play football and how they develop young players. I mean, the point proven when they got to the semi-finals, I was loving watching them beat Real Madrid more so than any Portuguese team in the last decade. So I'll say the Eredivisie, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just to back up your point on Bruno Fernandes, he'd done it in the Serie A before. He moved to Portugal, so we were a little bit more confident he'd at least make an impression. Obviously not to this level, but lest we forget, Angel Di Maria was also unbelievable for half a season, and I do think his all-round game at United has been extremely impressive. Like, he's not just good at one thing, is he? He's not just contributing to goals. He's also taking the most shots. He's also pressing, like you said. He's picking the ball up from deep. So United fans should be confident that he can continue in this vein of form, by all means. But, I mean, let's still temper expectations, because he's come in at a time when the club needed a saviour. He's clearly relishing that role. But let's see, how he fares when the expectation is to finish in the top two. For the record, I still think he's going to be very good. I think you two nailed it, to be honest. Hit the nail on the head with those divisions. As just a weird afterthought, I've been watching a lot of Brazilian Serie A highlights, and they will shoot from anywhere, by the way. Absolutely ridiculous. It's hilarious. It's such good fun. They will shoot. I was watching Adriano compilations at Flamengo and Ronaldo at Corinthians, and there's left backs shooting from 30, 40 yards each time. It was like who's the Argentinian left back you signed that you sold eventually a year or so ago, Joe? Man United.
Rojo.
Marcus Rose still at the club, mate. Put some respect on his name.
Oh, I thought you'd sold him. He almost went to Everton,
around, mate.
He almost went to Everton, didn't he? Do you remember that compilation of him like shooting from anywhere?
Yeah,
in the Portuguese division. It's pretty much like that. But that's my contribution to that question.
That's what Bruno does now. Like, that's the only thing I don't really like about Bruno so far. I'm just like, keep the shots from the edge of the box, cut out the shots from like 30 yards. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's definitely better having him do it than Marcus Rojo do it. But like, yeah, just some of those decisions, I feel like in the long run, Solskjaer might be like, once these stop going in, then I might tell him to stop doing it.
What have you made of Bruno so far, Pato? What interested to hear your thoughts just from a Man United perspective?
Oh, he's been excellent. I mean, like it's. I think, you know, like there is a slight wastefulness in his game, which I think happens when you're coming from a weaker league and a weaker team. You know, I think that a player with that ability is always going to be empowered at a smaller side to basically do whatever they want. And now, as he plays alongside Pogba more, it'll be interesting to see how the balance shifts, you know, in who gets on the ball more, who is required to do kind of the lion's share of creation or of playmaking. He's running extremely hot right now, so I don't think this is going to quite last forever, but I don't think that necessarily matters, because like he'll have the fans on side by the time it does cool down, and so long as their expectations are reasonable, that's the worry. So long as their expectations are reasonable, he'll basically be fine. I mean, the thing is, United have been on such an unsustainably hot run anyway. They've both been very, very good, and scoring at a higher rate and conceding at a lower rate than you'd expect, right? Like, what is it now? Like,
I think it's 15 games unbeaten, 37 scored, 4 conceded.
Yeah, like that is form that pretty much no club in the world can sustain. Yeah. So you'd expect that to come back to earth a little bit. But our issue originally was really with the size of the fee, and I still think the size of the fee for a player out of Portugal is high. But if you're talking about the fee for a player of this quality, then obviously I think it's like it looks to be justified. And it's nice just to... I mean, look, I love Man United being terrible, but seeing their third goal last night, I was just like, I can't not enjoy this. This is fantastic. So, yeah, I don't know. Another entertaining team in the division can only be a good thing, and Fernandes seems to be like the central cog in making Man United entertaining.
Yeah, Tomlinson. What the bloody hell has happened to the Nemanja Matic?
Mate, Nemanja Matic has been fantastic for like 6 to 8 months for Man United. He's been so good recently. I don't know what on earth Solskjaer's been putting in his food, but he's just completely turned his Man United career on a head this season. Just really outstanding performance after outstanding performance. And to be honest with you, is the only defensive midfielder we've got in the squad that can play in that role to allow Pogba and Bruno a little bit more freedom, because he's the only one that is a natural sitter as a natural defensive midfielder. Obviously, McTominay and Fred want to jump out the line more, want to press more, want to get a little bit higher up the pitch, whereas Matic is perfectly happy to let Bruno and Pogba do that. So in this system, he's the only guy that can play there, and he's playing well, man. He's just doing everything he needs to do.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that they're kind of playing together, but then also at sometimes like not at all. Like they're kind of set up in a line almost to enable you to play like really vertically and really aggressively. Like Matic to Pogba, Pogba to Bruno, like almost all in a line. What kind of final parts do you think Man United need to make this click, or if any at all? I mean, the emergence of Greenwood might mean that you don't need a right winger, right?
No, United definitely need a right winger. Definitely need a right winger. I love Mason Greenwood, but I think he's a more natural 9. I think he's a more natural striker. So I think that's where his future will end up lying. I think obviously all the rumours of United being like, we're not going to pay above £50 million. That's what Man United said about Bruno. I remember everybody saying, Sporting 180 for Bruno, and then there was Man United saying we won't pay more than 40 or 30. If United came out and said we're going to pay 200 million for Jadon Sancho, then we suddenly have to pay ridiculous amounts, don't we? So I think it's just probably a bit of business sense. But I also think a defensive midfielder is very key. Nemanja Matic, as good as he's been for eight months and past year maybe, he's 32 now maybe. Definitely needs a younger deputy in there. And I think another attacking midfielder potentially if Mata, Lingard and Pereira do leave the club this summer. I think if you have 3 outs there, then that's probably a hole that needs to be filled, and Bruno can't play every minute of every single game. So I would suggest those are probably the areas United will look to fill: centre mid / attacking mid, defensive mid, and a right winger. those would be my areas I'd be targeting anyway. And I think United will dip into one of the teams that gets relegated. If West Ham go down, I think United will go for Declan Rice. If Villa go down, I think they'll go for Grealish. And then obviously it'll be all guns blazing for Jadon Sancho.
Yeah, nice.
Right, let's go on to Tom Crook's question, who says, what's your favourite team to watch that isn't the team you support? Pato, any suggestions?
Oh my god. Like Dortmund and Leipzig are pretty good. Like you know that there are going to be goals when they play. You know they're going to attack like crazy. That's fun. Like same goes for Atalanta. In the Premier League, I wonder if is there a team that if they're on, I'll watch them. You know what? I actually do enjoy watching Lampard's Chelsea. I think Lampard's Chelsea. Like, I can't quite decide whether Frank Lampard is actually a good coach. Maybe he is. He might be rubbish. Like I genuinely don't know. But his team is really entertaining. There's loads of talent in that squad. And they play at a really high pace. And that's something I kind of enjoy seeing. I think that when you add Werner into there and Ziyech, like, they're going to be like a real force to be reckoned with, especially if they can get a left back and a keeper over the line.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm struggling, to be honest with you. Definitely not like Tottenham. Don't enjoy watching Tottenham. Don't enjoy watching Wolves either.
Definitely not Tottenham.
Probably Man City. I know that they haven't, points-wise, put up the season Liverpool have. But yeah, it's just something about watching Man City and the way Guardiola plays football is just so fun, isn't it? It's just constant barrages of attacks. Everybody will be like, oh, I know we said Liverpool. Yeah, Liverpool are good to watch as well, but can we stop talking about them?
Yeah, I mean, they are the obvious answers, aren't they? Like, City and Liverpool have been playing the best football by far.
Yeah.
And even since football returned, it took... Oh, 20% battery left. Wait for that to come back on. There we go. It took until the Liverpool Palace game, I think, before I saw a game where I was like, okay, here's a starting 11 who are ready. But I think Atalanta are a great shout. My love for them pretty well documented. Leeds as well. Like that is probably the only EFL team I'd watch, despite wanting to be more invested in the EFL. So yeah, maybe Bielsa's Leeds. Let's hope they come up, eh?
Well, this is a great personal question here we've had submitted by Meath Handa. He says, what is one question you're sick of receiving whilst collating the questions for Sunday Vibes? That's one of my favourite questions of any in Sunday Vibes history. Go on, Hamill, you must have an answer for that. You usually put the tweet out.
Sick of... I mean, as much as people think we revel in talking about like the same top 6 teams... Like, we don't really, do we? There has to be an element of, like, pragmatism when we title stuff. So it does get a bit boring talking about United, Liverpool. Like, Firmino's exit, boring. What other transfer? Like, even talking about, like... I remember there was a period where Lewandowski was supposed to be going to Real Madrid. Like, boring. Like, Jadon Sancho to United, that trope starting to tire a little bit. I'll have a think and maybe come back after Pat's answers. I imagine you've got a few, Pat.
I'm actually struggling, but anything that's just like somehow we will do like a rebuild Arsenal podcast or Man United, and the next week everyone will still be asking how you rebuild Arsenal and Man United. That's pretty dull. How can Barcelona move on from Messi? Like, anything to do with Messi is always, like, dumb. Because I'm just like, I don't know why you expect 3 people, like, Skyping each other from their sitting rooms to be able to solve how a super club replaces the best player of all time. Like, that is not a reasonable expectation to have. So anything
Ballon
like that,
d'Or questions.
Can X young player who scored 3 goals in the league, like, can he surpass so-so? It'll be like, can Martinelli surpass Henry? Can Mason Greenwood be better than Andy Cole? And
mate,
like,
that's the one. It's the future. It's like, will Marcus Rashford win the Ballon d'Or before Mbappe? It's like, it's just like, man, I'm not going to predict 4 years into the future.
Did you see the United fan on Twitter who was saying, he was like, look, Mason Greenwood and Van Persie have a lot of similarities, but I think Greenwood will far outstrip Van Persie. And I was just like,
how do you know?
And also you're like, Mason Greenwood needs to get 20 goal involvements in the league for the next 10 years to match what Van Persie did. Like, the chances of any youngster becoming like the best striker in the world are quite slim, no matter how good they are. Like, it's ridiculous.
And it's just not fair on that youngster either. Like, to to put that level of expectation on them. Like, after 6 goal contributions in the Premier League, Mason Greenwood has, just because of similarities in his play, is already, he's now got a match up to the career of Robin Van Persie. Ridiculous. Yeah, Ballon d'Or related questions are absolute snoozeville.
Obviously,
I do want to caveat
Ronaldo
this
versus
with
Messi. Ronaldo versus Messi is the worst.
Although they have died down now. They have died down a little bit, haven't they? Ronaldo versus Messi. Like 2016, 2017, that's kind of all we had to go off. Pogba leaving United. But still, get your questions in. We love answering them, and we really value your contribution.
Yeah, try and think outside the box there, because I do think they're more likely to be answered if they're a little bit outside the box. Right, anyway, that's it for this week's Sunday Vibes. Anybody got anything to plug? Hamill?
The Everything You Need to Know and Adriano. I was shot a podcast yesterday with Pat, and I watched it back, and it was actually a pretty darn good conversation on Arthur and Pjanic. So go and watch that. That'll be out on Wednesday, so you might have to trawl back a little bit.
And also, people should keep an eye out for podcasts going forward. We're going to have a dedicated channel for Football Daily Podcast with the current Extra Time podcast, and there will be a European football special one coming out as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And of course, make sure that you subscribe to it on Spotify or on the podcast app, Stitcher, Overcast, whatever you happen to use.
There we go. Right. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. See you later. Bye.
Bye.